Reasonable Blackman was one of the earliest people of African heritage to live and work as an independent business owner in Tudor England. He was a silk merchant based in Southwark, South London. We do not know how he came to live in England, but he most likely came from the Netherlands because it had a significant African population and had a significant trade in silk. He is first mentioned in records in 1579 due to records from Southwark Cathedral, then called St Saviour's Church, and is last mentioned in 1592 after two of his children died from the bubonic plague. This video will talk about the possible origins of his name, his trades, and a bit about the aftermath of the death of his two children. A silk weaver living in Southwark, at the time known for its brothels and alehouses, Reasonable Blackman was a freeman living in England. Historian Miranda Kaufman, who wrote the book Black Tudors, suggests that his first name may have been a nickname due to his reasonable prices. His surname may have been an indicator of his skin colour, as last names like Blackamoor or Moore, or in this case Blackman, were taken by Africans living in England. Although these surnames did not always mean that the person was of African descent, Reasonable was described as being a blackamoor on parish registers. We don't know which African country Reasonable came from. However, it's likely he arrived in England via the Netherlands. The reason is that a lot of people from Southwark were silk weavers from the Netherlands, which is a centre of cloth production during the Tudor period. Due to its relationship with Spain, Netherlands ended up with a sizable African population. Many slaves were freed in the Netherlands, and Reasonable could have been one of them. However, when the Dutch revolt erupted, about 50,000 people fled to England, including silk weavers, and this might be the explanation to how Reasonable ended up in England. He lived near Tooley Street, near London Bridge. Silk was a precious material in Tudor England and was a sign of aristocratic status. The fabric was finer due to the steel needle invented in Spain that was used to make it. Other clothing materials were done with bone, ivory and wood needles in England. Queen Elizabeth I said, "I like silk stockings well. They are pleasant, fine and delicate. Henceforth I will wear no more cloth stockings." Her courtiers wore silk as a sign of their status, and wearing the fabric was banned if one came from the lower classes. In 1533, those who earned under £100 a year were banned from wearing silk and other expensive fabrics. Still, those who could afford the garment would ignore the law, and those who couldn't afford the garment would wear silk accessories. In response to this, a law in 1554 forbade the wearing of silk accessories, and those who broke the law would be fined £10 per day for every time they wore the clothing and accessory, as well as 3 months in prison. Between 1560 to 1593, silk was in higher demand, and the raw silk imports increased by 5 times. The best silk came from Italy. However, silk weavers mixed silk with linen or wool to make it cheaper to buy, and it was used for handkerchiefs, bed curtains and lining. Reasonable would have been one of the silk weavers who did this. After all, he was possibly known for his reasonable prices, like I said before. It is also suggested that he made costumes for the theatres in Southwark. In 1587, he got married. He later had at least 3 children, meaning he clearly had sufficient means for a family. Historians suggest that his wife was white English because even though there was a black population in England, it was very small compared to other European countries. However, there is no record of the wife since Tudor England only names the fathers in birth certificates. His children were called Edward, Edmund and Jane, and were all baptised in St Olave's Church, Southwark. Records show that a 4th child, also baptised at the church, might have been his because they had a similar surname. Unfortunately, in 1592, Edmund and Jane died of bubonic plague, which had high mortality rates. The 2 children were buried in St Olave's churchyard. Unfortunately, This is the last mention of Reasonable, and it's unknown whether he died in England or elsewhere. However, an Edward Blackman is mentioned. He worked as a silk weaver in Spitalfields, East London, and is the right age to be Reasonable's son. There is a record that mentions that Edward Blackmore of Mile End, silk weaver, married Jean Cole of Stepney, dated on 6th March 1614, when Edward would have been 27 years old. So if he was Reasonable's son, it would be nice to hear that Edward continued his father's trade. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed it.